The night opens slowly over the northern sea, where the air carries the faint taste of salt and ice, and every sound seems softened by distance. The water moves with a low, endless rhythm, a breathing older than memory. Pale light lingers along the horizon, neither day nor night, only a grey stillness that hums quietly against the wooden hull. The ship glides forward without effort, its oars dipping in time with the waves, each stroke a whisper across the surface of the dark. There is no comfort here, no warmth, no promise of morning, only motion, steady and unbroken. Every plank beneath their feet sighs with age, damp and cold, yet the vessel holds together as though bound by its own stubborn will. The ropes along the mast hum faintly when the wind passes, and frost gathers in small white veins along the edges of the shields. The men say little. Words are wasted in the air that freezes them before they fall. Their breath curls into clouds that vanish before reaching another face. Around them, the sea spreads wide and endless, grey upon grey, until even the horizon seems to disappear into mist. The cold is not cruel here, it is indifferent, vast and constant, pressing softly against the skin like a silent weight that cannot be lifted. They stand within it, motionless between stars and water, wrapped in heavy wool that holds the smell of salt and smoke. Beneath their boots, the deck glistens with frost, and every movement leaves a faint echo of sound. The oars rise and fall, the rhythm unchanging, the effort quiet and precise. The sea replies with the hush of waves against wood, an ancient language without anger or mercy. Above them, the sky remains open and wide, scattered with faint light that trembles through thin clouds. Each man feels the distance between himself and the shore he left behind, but none look back. The sea allows no past, only the slow patience of the present. In this first hour, time feels heavy, drawn out by the weight of stillness. The cold seeps into their hands, their faces, the very breath they take, and yet there is no resistance. The men endure as the ship endures. The world narrows to the rhythm of the oars, the whisper of the sea, and the quiet space between heartbeats. Out here, where sound fades and warmth forgets them, the Vikings move through the frozen dark, not as conquerors, but as part of the vast, breathing calm that stretches beyond sight. The cold sea and the end of warmth. The North Sea lies before them like an unbroken sheet of frozen iron, grey beneath grey, vast beyond the measure of sight. The wind moves slowly over it, dragging with it the taste of salt, the breath of cold metal, the weight of endless distance. The ship creaks but holds, its wooden ribs straining against the pressure of water that feels more like glass than liquid. The air is so sharp it seems alive, slicing through layers of wool and skin alike. Every breath enters like splinters, leaving a sting that stays. Around them, frost forms along the edges of ropes and lashes itself across the planks, turning every surface pale. The men do not speak. Their words would freeze before they reached another ear. Their faces are still, turned toward the horizon, their eyes narrowed against the wind that never stops moving. Beneath their feet, straw has been scattered to soften the deck, but the cold passes through it as though through mist. It reaches the bone and settles there, deep and unmoving. The sea does not roar. It whispers in tones that are steady, heavy, and slow. It has no emotion, no anger, no welcome. It simply exists, infinite and indifferent. The men know this, and so they no longer look for comfort in it. They move because movement is the only warmth they can create. Their arms pull the oars forward, their muscles working in silence, their breath measured, their pace unbroken. The ship does not protect them, it merely keeps them from sinking. Above, the sky is colorless, a long shroud of gray where no sun can pass. Sometimes the horizon disappears entirely, and the men feel as if they are suspended between two mirrors, one of water, one of cloud, each reflecting the same still emptiness. When night approaches, the difference between sea and sky fades altogether. The stars, faint and distant, look like cold eyes staring through the mist. The air grows heavier and the frost thickens until their cloaks stiffen when they move. They sleep rarely, and when they do, it feels less like rest and more like sinking into the weight of the ship itself. The body forgets warmth, forgets softness, forgets that air can once have been gentle. They lie close together on the hard wood, wrapped in layers of damp cloth, breathing slowly, sharing what little heat remains within them. The sound of their sleep is shallow, interrupted by the creak of the hull and the slow wash of water against its sides. In that half-sleep, they dream not of land, but of silence. Morning brings no light, only a thinner shade of grey. Ice has formed along the edge of the oars, so that when the men lift them, the frost cracks like glass. Their hands, stiff and red, hold firm despite the pain. They do not look at one another. There is nothing to say. They simply move. Each stroke sends a soft ripple across the water, a fragile rhythm that seems to keep time with their hearts. The sea responds with quiet weight, pressing back without resistance, without malice. The world feels emptied of life, but not of presence. It hums with stillness, a sound that belongs not to living things, but to the earth itself. In this endless grey, warmth becomes an idea, something remembered but no longer real. The men recall fires from the shores they left behind, the glow of hearths, the smell of wood smoke. Those memories flicker briefly and then fade like breath in the cold. The body no longer expects comfort, it becomes a vessel for endurance. The rhythm of their work replaces thought. Their hearts beat with the sea, their breath moves with the oars, their will aligns with the motion of the ship. Each moment feels both eternal and fleeting, suspended between effort and stillness. The cold has its own texture, not violent, not sharp, but endless. It seeps rather than strikes, fills rather than burns. It becomes part of them, a second skin beneath the wool and fur. When the wind shifts, the sea sprays them with needles of salt that freeze instantly upon their cheeks. The frost glitters faintly in the dim light, and for a moment, even the suffering seems quiet, almost beautiful. There is no fight here, only acceptance. The men understand that resistance wastes strength. To survive the sea, they must become like it. Patient, slow, without anger, without hope. Hours pass, though they cannot tell how many. The world has no clock here, only repetition. The body moves because it must. The air grows heavier, the muscles tighten, the breath slows. Yet somewhere in this rhythm there is peace. The mind empties itself of thought, leaving only motion, only the awareness of being alive within the great silence. The sound of the sea becomes the sound of their pulse. The wood beneath their feet vibrates with life, the slow heartbeat of the ship echoing through their bones. There are moments when the mist clears and they see far, a stretch of water shimmering like polished stone, the faint reflection of a distant star, a line of dark waves rising and falling in silence. These glimpses do not bring joy, they simply remind them that the world continues beyond the cold. When the fog returns, the men lower their eyes again, drawing their cloaks closer, pulling the oars as they have done 1,000 times. The act itself becomes a form of prayer, without words, a ritual of endurance that belongs only to those who have known the sound of frozen wind and lived through it. By now, their bodies no longer tremble. They have learned the rhythm of the cold, learned to move with it rather than against it. The sea no longer feels like an enemy, but like a vast teacher whose lessons are patience and silence. The warmth they once sought has turned inward, small and hidden, a quiet flame somewhere beneath the ribs. It flickers, but does not die. The men do not speak of it, but they feel it. The thin persistence of life moving beneath layers of frost. As the ship glides through the frozen sea, night deepens again, and the sky folds over them like a vast curtain. The stars return, faint and distant, scattered across the mist. Their light touches the water, but gives no heat. The men continue to row, their faces pale, their eyes steady, their movements calm. This is not courage, it is not defiance, it is simply existence, stripped of everything except rhythm. They pull, breathe, and continue, carried forward by something older than will. The quiet agreement between man and sea that neither can escape the other. They no longer count the hours. The world has narrowed to sound, breath, and motion. The oars rise, the oars fall. Frost thickens, wind hums, water whispers. There is no destination, only distance. The men endure not because they hope for warmth, but because endurance itself has become their form of peace. The North Sea waits like a mirror of stone, and within that reflection they see themselves, still, cold, and unbroken. The sleeping fire. Hidden deep within the wooden ribs of the ship, sheltered beneath a rough plank and a handful of ash, there lives a quiet ember. It is not fire as one would imagine it. No flame, no flicker, no warmth that spreads across skin. It is a memory of fire, an echo of what once burned bright and alive. The Vikings call it the sleeping fire, and they guard it with the same care they give to breath itself. In a small pot made of clay or iron, the coals lie buried under grey dust, still faintly alive. Sometimes, in the long, quiet hours between storms, one of the men kneels beside it and leans close. His face, half hidden by frost, lowers until his lips nearly touch the rim of the pot. A soft exhale, slow and deliberate, moves through the ash. If the ember answers with a glow, even the faintest red pulse, the man nods. The fire still breathes. It is not a fire meant for cooking, nor for light, nor for heat. It is too small to fight the cold, too weak to warm the air, yet too sacred to abandon. Its existence is not practical. It is symbolic. It carries the memory of warmth through a world that has forgotten it. In the silence of the sea, where everything freezes and even breath turns to mist, the ember is proof that something inside the world still lives. The men do not speak to it, but they think of it often. They glance toward the pot as they move about the ship, their eyes catching that soft, dull glow, like one would catch a heartbeat in the dark. Each man knows that if it dies, a piece of their hope would vanish with it. The sleeping fire becomes their secret center, a single point of color in a universe of gray. When the ship drifts beneath clouds and snow, when the cold sharpens until every sound seems carved in glass, the ember continues its slow existence. It consumes nothing but time. Its warmth is too subtle to touch, but it shapes the air around it in the smallest way, bending the frost, softening the silence. The men imagine that within that little pot there is a spirit that never sleeps, keeping watch as they row through the frozen dark. They treat it with reverence. No one lets water spill near it. No one leaves it uncovered. If the wind grows too strong, they shelter it beneath a shield or a piece of fur. In this act of protection, the ember becomes more than coal. It becomes companionship. Each morning, before they begin the long hours of rowing, one man breathes life into it again. He lifts the lid, careful not to let the ash scatter, and bends close until his face glows faintly red. His breath moves softly over the coals, and in that breath there is something ancient, something quiet. The same exchange between air and fire that has happened since the first hearth was built. When the ember stirs, when a thread of smoke rises, the man closes the lid again, satisfied. The ritual takes only a minute, but in the stillness of the sea, it feels like the turning of time itself. The fire is called sleeping because it must remain that way. A flame cannot live on the ship. It would devour everything that carries it. The wood, sealed with pitch, would catch like dry leaves. A single spark could bring ruin. And so the fire must dream instead of waking. It must rest beneath its blanket of ash, breathing gently, never flaring, never calling attention to itself. It teaches the men the meaning of quiet endurance. Like them, it survives by restraint. Like them, it continues by not burning too bright. At night, when the work ends and the sea moves only in long, low sighs, the men gather near the place where the ember lies. They do not open it, for the cold would steal its strength, but they sit around it, hands extended toward the pot as if to catch a reflection of its warmth. It is not the heat they reach for, but the idea of it. The knowledge that beneath the ash, beneath the silence, something still glows. The flicker they cannot see becomes a shared imagination, a point of light within their minds. Around that invisible center, they find stillness. The sea hums outside, the ship creaks, and their breathing falls into the same calm rhythm. In the long dark of the northern winter, this small fire becomes their connection to the world beyond the sea. It reminds them of hearths left behind, of the smell of burning wood, the slow crackle of resin, the soft orange light touching the faces of those who waited at home. The ember holds the memory of those moments, not as pictures, but as warmth remembered by the body. Each man, without speaking, feels that connection. It passes between them like the faintest current, almost too quiet to name. When the storms come, when the air grows heavy with snow and the ship tilts beneath the wind, the men protect the ember before they protect themselves. They seal its pot, tuck it beneath layers of hide, and fix it near the center beam where the motion of the sea is gentlest. Even as the waves crash and the deck floods with icy water, the ember endures. It sleeps through the chaos untouchable. When calm returns, the men check it first, brushing away the damp ash, searching for that faint red heart still beating. When it is found, they nod again, silent, each feeling the same quiet relief that life has not left them entirely. Sometimes, during the long drift between destinations, they will open the pot just to watch the soft red pulse. It is no larger than the eye of a bird, yet in that dim light, the whole ship seems to breathe differently. The air warms slightly, the men's faces soften, and their hands rest still for a while. The ember gives no heat, yet it burns in their thoughts, a reminder that warmth can exist even when the world is made of frost. The fire's endurance becomes their own. In this way, the sleeping fire is not only a physical thing, but a mirror of their spirit. It teaches them patience, the art of burning without consuming, of living without demanding, of lasting without noise. It asks nothing but protection, and in return it offers meaning. It is the simplest of companions, small, silent, eternal. Even when the men sleep, the ember stays awake, pulsing faintly beneath the wood, holding its fragile glow against the dark weight of the sea. And so through the long voyage, while storms come and fade, while cold deepens and stars vanish behind mist, the sleeping fire continues. It becomes the quiet heart of the ship, the unseen center that binds everything together. Around it, the men eat, rest, sing softly, and breathe. Around it, the ship endures the endless water and the long winter sky. When all else fades into grey, the Ember remains, a small, patient light, carried through the cold like a secret, reminding those who live beside it that warmth, though unseen, never truly dies. The layers of survival. The cold never truly leaves them. It lingers in every breath, hides in the seams of their clothes, presses into the skin until even the heartbeat feels slower. To exist upon the northern sea means to live inside that cold as one might live inside air, constant, invisible, unyielding. And so the men learn to build walls upon their own bodies, thin fortresses of fabric and fur, layers of patience stitched against a world that does not forgive bare flesh. It begins with wool, coarse, rough, and always damp, pulled close around the body in tunics and shirts that cling with the smell of salt. The wool scratches, itches, chafes, but it holds heat like memory holds light. They wear it not for comfort, but for endurance. Over the wool they draw heavier cloaks woven thick, their edges darkened by frost, their fibers stiff from days of frozen mist. The cloaks move with weight, like a second skin made of the sea's own grey silence. Above that, they add hides, the fur of deer, fox, or bear, soft once, but now hardened by salt and wind. The fur still carries the faint trace of life, the smell of soil, the echo of breath, something animal and warm beneath the decay. When tied across the shoulders, it becomes a barrier not only against the air, but against despair. The hides whisper when the men move, a low rasp like dry grass beneath snow. Beneath all of this, close to the skin, the body steams faintly, fighting to remind itself that it still lives. Sweat and seawater mix, freeze, thaw, and freeze again. The wool absorbs it, the fur resists it, and between them the body continues to function in its slow, unending rhythm. Every layer has its purpose, every thread a small act of defiance against the void of cold surrounding them. Their legs are wrapped in bands of wool and leather, bound tight from knee to ankle. Over time, these wrappings harden, the outer fibers turning to frost, while the inner remain damp. The men adjust them often, pulling the straps tighter as the fabric contracts. The motion becomes instinct, pull, tie, breathe, repeat, done without thought, as natural as drawing air. Their boots are made from heavy leather, blackened by tar, and lined with dried moss or straw. When new, they are soft and pliant. After weeks at sea, they stiffen into shapes molded by each man's foot. The straw inside shifts as they walk, a quiet rustling that keeps the mind aware of its own body. Without it, the cold from the deck would rise through the soles and steal the warmth from the blood. Everything they wear is heavy, soaked with the sea's breath, but the weight becomes part of them. The sound of movement aboard the ship is soft, almost musical, the rub of wool against wood, the faint clap of leather upon frost, the whisper of fur brushing the wind. Each sound is part of the rhythm of survival. The men do not speak often, but their clothes speak for them. The creak of a belt, the sigh of a sleeve, the hiss of breath against a scarf. These are their language now. When one adjusts his cloak, the others hear it and know the cold has deepened. When one's boots scrape longer against the deck, they understand that frost has thickened beneath his steps. The layers are not only garments, they are signals, shared messages written in fabric and sound. Through them, they keep their quiet order, each man a moving fortress of patience. Sometimes, when the sun rises, though it is not truly a rise, but a dim widening of grey, the frost on their cloaks begins to glisten. It catches the faint light like 1,000 shards of glass. The men become figures carved from ice, statues that move and breathe. Steam curls faintly from their shoulders, where the heat of the body meets the air. For a few moments, they look almost luminous, glowing softly in the frozen dawn. Then the light fades, the frost thickens again, and the illusion passes. Still within the layers, the warmth remains. It is fragile, easily stolen, but it is theirs. Inside these wrappings, the body becomes a slow furnace. Every breath feeds it, every movement stirs its embers. When they row, the friction of motion brings heat. When they stop, it drains away almost instantly. The men learn to control this balance with care, to move just enough, to rest without surrendering their warmth. The layers around them trap the air, creating a thin world of their own between skin and sea. It is not comfort, but it is survival. Within that small boundary, they build their endurance one heartbeat at a time. The smell of their clothing tells the story of the voyage: tar, sweat, brine, and smoke. Wool soaked in salt has a scent that never fades, a tang that clings even when dry. The hides add another note: earthy, faintly sweet, like frozen soil after rain. When the wind shifts, the smells mingle and rise, forming an invisible cloud around the ship. It is the scent of persistence, of men who carry their world upon their backs. Sometimes the wind catches it and carries it across the deck, reminding them that they are alive not by sight or sound, but by the trace of their own labor lingering in the air. At night, when they rest, the men unfasten only what they must. To remove too much is to invite the cold inside, and once inside, it never leaves. They loosen the belts at their waists, open the tops of their cloaks just enough to breathe, and curl beneath shared furs. The air beneath the layers grows thick, warmed by breath and sweat, heavy but precious. Frost gathers along the outer seams, glittering faintly like stars. The sound of fabric shifting replaces speech. Each man feels the pulse of the other through the layers, slow, steady, proof of life continuing. The clothes become more than defense, they become connection. The act of dressing each morning is as deliberate as a ritual. They begin with the tunic, then the leggings, the wrappings, the furs. Each layer seals the body again, enclosing warmth, as one might seal a letter meant for distant delivery. Hands move slowly, fingers stiff but careful, pulling knots, tightening cords, pressing seams flat against the skin. The process takes time. It is a kind of meditation, a return to purpose. By the end, they are once again sealed against the elements, silent and strong, their forms indistinguishable from the grey around them. The sea sees only movement, never the man beneath. Over weeks, the garments grow heavier. Ice builds upon them until even the furs carry a thin armor of frost. The weight should crush them, but it steadies them instead. It reminds them of the air they fight, the world they endure. When the wind strikes, the layers absorb the force and ripple softly, muffling sound and feeling alike. The cold no longer feels like an enemy, it becomes a condition of being. Within the walls of wool and hide, they learn stillness, patience, and the quiet truth that warmth, like strength, must be carried within. And so, each man becomes his own shelter. The layers he wears are both armor and burden, each thread a boundary between his breath and the void. The garments grow stiff, the seams crack, the smell deepens, yet they endure. Beneath them, the body remains a small, constant flame, unseen but real. When the ship groans under the weight of wind, when frost thickens like dust upon the deck, when every surface gleams with ice, the men move slowly through it all. wrapped in the quiet resilience they have built with their hands. The cold presses closer, the sea exhales, and the layers hold. In the sound of cloth brushing wood, in the rhythm of breath and movement, survival continues, silent, deliberate, one layer at a time. The ship as shelter. The longship moves with a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though it understands the weight it carries, the burden of men, of tools, of silence, of breath. Its frame is narrow, yet strong, its ribs carved from oak that once stood deep within the northern forests where wind and snow had shaped its grain. Now that same wind follows it across the open sea, bending it, testing it, reminding the ship of where it came from. Each plank overlaps another, fastened tight, sealed with black tar that shines faintly when touched by salt spray. The tar keeps the water out, but it cannot keep out the cold. Frost settles on every beam, every nail, every knot in the wood. The sound of the ship moving is constant, a creak, a sigh, a slow groan that rises from its bones and fades into the waves. The sea presses from below, the wind presses from above, and in between the long ship endures, bending but never breaking. Along its sides hang shields, round and painted, though the colours have long faded under salt and storm. They serve as both armour and ornament, half defence, half memory of battle. When the waves strike, water splashes against them and runs down in narrow streams, freezing in thin layers that glimmer in the grey light. The shields hum faintly when the wind finds the right angle, their edges vibrating like distant drums. For the men who row, that hum becomes rhythm, a soft, steady sound that keeps them moving even when the cold dulls thought. Every part of the ship has a voice. The oars dipping into the water, the ropes tightening with strain, the mast whispering against the air. Together they make a kind of music, an ancient composition of wood and wind, endless and unchanging. When storms approach, when the horizon darkens and the air grows heavy with salt, the men prepare the ship as one might prepare a house before nightfall. They move slowly, without words, each knowing what must be done. Ropes are tightened, sails lowered, supplies tied down with care. Then they draw a sheet of sailcloth across the center of the ship, stretching it from one side to the other, anchoring it with oars and pegs until it becomes a low, sagging roof. Beneath this canvas the air grows dim, the sound of the sea softens, and the world shrinks to a narrow strip of shelter. It is not comfort, but it is something like safety. The men crawl beneath it, cloaked in furs and damp wool, their shoulders touching, their breath mingling in the confined space. Outside, the waves rise and strike against the hull, but inside, the motion feels slower, as if time itself hesitates before entering. The sailcloth tent collects the sea's breath. Mist and vapor rise from below, gathering along its underside until droplets form and fall back upon the men in slow, patient rhythm. The drops are cold, but harmless. They mark time in silence. Some fall onto faces, into beards, onto hands that no longer react to temperature. The men lie still, their eyes half closed, listening to the muted world outside. The ship sways, and with each motion the ropes strain, the wood complains, the canvas trembles. The sound becomes lullaby. They do not sleep deeply, but they drift, resting in fragments, their minds quieted by exhaustion. Beneath the thin roof, they are like seeds within a pod, gathered tightly against the weight of the world. When the wind howls too loud, they hear it through the layers, a distant roar that turns to a whisper by the time it reaches them. The storm loses its shape, becomes a vague pressure against the canvas. The air beneath remains thick, smelling of wool, sweat, and tar. It is a living scent, warm in places, sharp in others, but real, reminding them of their closeness. The tent traps their heat, their breath, their quiet murmurs. They do not talk much, but when they do, the voices stay low, more vibration than sound, like wind moving through stone. Even silence takes on weight here. Every drop that falls, every creak that answers it, becomes a measure of survival. The ship itself is more than transport. It is body and soul, a living thing made of memory and endurance. The men treat it not as a tool, but as a companion. They know its moods, the tone of its wood when calm, the pitch of its groan when strained. They can tell from the sound beneath their feet whether the planks have swollen or stayed firm. Each piece of timber has its role, the keel, the ribs, the boards overlapping like scales of a patient creature gliding through darkness. The longship holds them together, not just physically but in spirit. Without it, they would be scattered, lost to the sea. With it, they become a single body. Men, wood, and movement united by necessity. Sometimes, when the weather clears and the tent is lifted, they see the deck glistening with thin ice. They scrape it away carefully, using knives or the edges of their shields. Beneath, the wood reveals its familiar texture, grooved, dark and damp, with lines worn smooth by boots and water. Every mark tells a story, where an oar once struck, where a pot once rested, where the edge of frost refused to melt. The men move with respect upon this surface, stepping lightly, never careless. The ship has carried them through storms that would have drowned others. It has no voice of comfort, but it gives them a place to rest their bodies, a line of stability between chaos and void. In the rare moments of calm, when the waves flatten and the wind sleeps, the ship becomes still enough for reflection. The men sit upon its deck, leaning against shields or barrels, their eyes on the horizon. The quiet feels enormous, almost sacred. They can hear the faint groan of the wood expanding, the trickle of water between the seams, the breath of the ocean beneath them. Some run their hands along the side of the ship, tracing the smooth curve of its hull, as one might trace the skin of a living creature. In that gesture lies gratitude, silent, simple, unspoken. Night falls again and they draw the tent once more. The same ritual, the same stillness. Beneath the low ceiling, condensation gathers, turns to drops, falls. The rhythm repeats, breath, drip, sway, silence. In those hours, the line between man and vessel fades. The ship becomes both shelter and grave, a wooden cradle drifting through mist. It is the only world they know, a moving island of wood and flesh, carried by invisible forces. The cold presses close, but the walls hold. To live within the long ship is to live inside a heartbeat that never stops. Every sound, every tremor, every faint vibration is proof that both ship and crew still breathe. It is their house, their coffin, their temple of endurance. When dawn returns, pale, dim, without warmth, they rise, fold the sailcloth, wipe the frost from their hands and begin again. The ship creaks in reply, patient and knowing, as though it understands its purpose, to carry them forward through water and time, to be their home between horizons, their shelter between storms, their fragile but unbroken world adrift in the endless grey. The food of endurance. Meals aboard the longship are not events, but intervals, brief pauses in the rhythm of motion, moments where men remember that the body must be fed, even when appetite has long ceased to exist. The sea offers nothing soft or generous, and so their food mirrors it, hard, dry, enduring. Salted fish, cut thin and brittle, breaks apart between the fingers like bark. Dried meat, dense and dark, resists the teeth before yielding. Bread, baked weeks before departure, has become stone under the air and salt. They chew slowly without complaint, knowing that the act of eating is not for pleasure, but preservation. The sound of it is quiet, the soft crack of a crust, the faint scrape of a knife against wood, the small shift of jaws moving in time with the sea. They sit low on the benches, cloaks drawn around them, the wind moving above, the water sighing below. Each mouthful tastes of smoke, brine, and distance, the flavor of endurance itself. The food is always cold. There is no fire here, no comfort of warmth rising from a pot, or the scent of something cooking. The sea forbids it. The wood that shelters them is soaked in pitch, the ropes oiled, the air heavy with tar. One spark would destroy them all. So they eat what does not need flame. Food cured in salt, smoked over ash, or dried under sun before the voyage began. Every piece carries the memory of the land they left, the faint echo of a hearth, the smell of soil and air, the hands that once prepared it. Yet now it is something else, transformed by time and distance into sustenance, stripped of all softness. Each bite is labor, but it keeps the body alive. Sometimes they eat in silence, each man turned inward, eyes fixed on nothing. Other times they pass a piece of bread or meat without speaking, the gesture small but understood. The food is shared because everything here is shared: breath, warmth, burden, endurance. When the waves rise too high, they eat with one hand and steady themselves with the other, the ship's motion dictating the rhythm of the meal. A few drops of seawater fall onto the bread, adding salt to salt. It changes nothing. They eat as the ship breathes in slow, measured rhythm, each bite an act of quiet defiance against hunger and cold. The taste of the sea is everywhere. It hides in the fish, in the barrels, in the air that coats their lips. Even the water they drink carries it, thick and faintly metallic, from the wooden casks. The barrels are sealed with tar to keep them from leaking, but the tar leaves its mark. Every swallow bears that flavor. Dark, bitter, like the memory of smoke. The men have grown used to it. They no longer separate the taste of their food from the taste of their world. Salt, wood, and tar, these are the elements of life now, as constant as breath. When they eat, they are reminded that they are still part of the sea, consuming pieces of it to keep moving within it. Their drink, when it comes, is ale or mead, faintly sweet, faintly bitter, thick with the scent of fermentation. It is not abundant, and it is never wasted. A small mouthful passes from one to another, warming the chest for a moment before fading. The warmth is an illusion, but illusion is enough. It softens the edges of fatigue, blurs the sharpness of thought, and brings color back to faces dulled by frost. The mead tastes of honey that has forgotten its flowers, of earth that has forgotten the sun. It carries the warmth of memory more than the warmth of heat. For a few breaths, the men feel something human return. Not joy, but recognition. Then it fades, leaving calm behind. The ship remains quiet through it all. The sound of eating blends with the creak of ropes, the sigh of oars, the low hum of the sea beneath. Sometimes a gull passes overhead, its cry vanishing into mist before it reaches the men. The act of feeding becomes part of the ship's rhythm, another motion among the countless motions that fill the endless voyage. There are no meal times, no divisions between day and night, only the small intervals when hunger demands attention. They eat because the body insists, not because the hour allows. The sea ignores their needs, and so they meet them in silence, efficient, without ceremony. Their provisions are stored in small barrels and sacks kept beneath benches. Each man knows how much remains. They count not in days but in rations. The number of pieces left, the weight of a bag when lifted. When something runs low, they share what's left without debate. The idea of possession has no place here. What one man holds belongs to all, and what one man loses is lost to all. The sea teaches this equality through necessity. In hunger, they are the same. Occasionally, when the wind is low and the water calm, one man might soften a piece of bread in his mouth before passing it to another, an act not of kindness, but of practicality, sharing what the teeth cannot manage alone. No one refuses it. The gesture carries no shame. In the dark, small acts replace words, a hand offering a strip of meat, a flask pressed into another's palm, a nod to show thanks. It is not friendship that moves them, but the quiet knowledge that survival is a shared task. After they eat, they sit in stillness. The food settles heavily, turning to warmth that feels more imagined than real. Their eyes half close, their bodies resting against the curve of the ship. The hum of the water becomes louder in the absence of motion. Some lean back against shields, others rest their heads on bundles of cloth. The sea moves beneath them, and the ship follows, steady as breath. The moment after eating is always the same, a hush filled only by the sound of the world continuing. There is no satisfaction in the meal, but there is peace in its completion. The hunger fades for now, the body endures, and that is enough. At times they think of the meals they once knew, of firelight, of the smell of roasted meat, of warm bread torn apart by clean hands. The memory arrives like a distant echo, too faint to hurt, but too vivid to ignore. They do not speak of it. To name warmth is to invite longing, and longing has no place at sea. Instead, they stay quiet, letting the images drift away like the foam behind the stern. Their hunger now belongs to the present, to the endless grey that surrounds them. The food of endurance is not meant to satisfy. It is meant to remind them that the body still has limits. Each meal teaches patience. Each bite is an acknowledgement of survival, not pleasure. When they chew the last piece of fish or swallow the final mouthful of ale, they return to their tasks without word or pause. The act is done, the body fueled, the rhythm resumes. Above them, the wind hums against the mast, and the long ship continues its path across the cold expanse. Within that rhythm, their hunger and their peace exist together, one feeding the other, both leading them forward through the unending sea. Top of form, the human warmth. When the cold deepens beyond measure and the sea becomes a shadow without edges, warmth ceases to be something of the air or the sun. It becomes a thing of flesh, a quiet exchange between bodies that refuse to let life fade. The stars vanish behind the clouds, the horizon disappears into blackness, and the world narrows to the small space where men lie, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, beneath the same weight of silence. The wind moves above them like an unseen creature, breathing against the sailcloth, pressing through every seam, searching for a way in. The air is so sharp it feels solid, as though each breath must be carved before it can be taken. Yet beneath the low canopy, within that dark cocoon of wool and fur, something fragile remains alive, the warmth that one man gives another without thought or word. It is not comfort, it is necessity. They lie together in rows, wrapped in layers that smell of salt and sweat, their cloaks drawn tight, their knees bent toward their chests. The heat between them builds slowly, invisible but real, like the faint glow beneath the ash of a sleeping fire. The sound inside the ship changes when men sleep this way. The creak of the wood becomes gentler, as if softened by breath. The hiss of wind fades into the background, replaced by the rhythm of human lungs, exhaling in unison. The sea still murmurs beneath them, steady and eternal, but above it there is a second rhythm, the pulse of life that continues even when consciousness fades. The men breathe, shift slightly, and the warmth gathers. It thickens the air, fogs the space between their faces, and for a few hours the cold loses its shape. They do not dream in color or sound. Their dreams are gray, made of motion and rest, as if the body itself remembers what it means to endure. There are no words spoken, no movement beyond the slow turning of heads, the slight tightening of a hand against a blanket, the small sigh that escapes when warmth finally reaches the bone. It is in these hours that they become something other than individuals. The boundaries between them blur, the edges of self soften. They share heat the way they share breath, unknowingly, without thought or choice. One man's warmth moves into another, his exhale becoming another's inhale, his body a wall against the dark. In the space of the ship, they are not warriors or travelers, but fragments of a single creature made to survive. The closeness is not affection, it is agreement. Each knows that the body beside him is the reason he will wake again. They trust the weight of another shoulder, the sound of another heartbeat, more than they trust the sky or the sea. Their unity is built not from belief, but from need, a quiet, animal understanding that no one endures the frozen world alone. The air beneath the sailcloth grows heavy with the scent of men. It is dense, metallic, almost sweet, carrying the mix of wool, leather, breath, and salt. It is not pleasant, yet it is the smell of safety, the proof that others are near. When one man stirs, the others feel it instantly, a ripple of movement traveling through the group. No words are needed, a shift of weight, the pulling of a cloak, a soft grunt in the dark. These sounds replace speech. The men do not speak because speech belongs to daylight, to warmth, to distance. In the night, they exist in a silence that feels sacred, not from reverence, but from survival. Even thought grows quieter, slower, aligning itself with the rhythm of the ship's motion. Outside, the sea hums against the hull, a sound without beginning or end. It is deep and patient, echoing through the wood and into their bones. The men feel it in their ribs as they lie pressed against one another, a low vibration that reminds them that they are still within the world's pulse. The sea does not threaten or soothe, it simply exists, and in its endlessness they find the scale of their smallness. Against such immensity, their shared heat feels miraculous. A defiance so quiet it could be mistaken for peace. Sometimes, when the ship tilts with a heavy wave, the bodies shift together, a slow, collective movement that feels like breathing. One man's arm slides against another's, a knee touches a thigh, a cloak falls open and is pulled back. These motions are instinctive, practiced through repetition. The men never open their eyes for long. There is nothing to see but darkness. Yet in that darkness, they sense each other's presence as clearly as light. The warmth moves between them in invisible waves. They do not cling, they lean. The closeness is practical, but within it there is a kind of grace, the unspoken understanding that their lives depend on shared stillness. Hours pass in this half-sleep. The storm outside rises and falls, but the men remain unmoving. The ship rocks beneath them, and droplets of condensation fall from the ceiling like slow rain, striking their faces and rolling down to soak into fur and cloth. No one wipes them away. The water is cold, but it is nothing compared to the wind beyond the canvas. The sound of those drops becomes a second heartbeat, irregular but constant, marking the passage of time in a world without clocks. Occasionally, someone exhales sharply, a sound almost like laughter but without joy. A release of air, a reminder of lungs still working. It is strange how the body adapts, how silence becomes communication, how stillness becomes safety, how cold teaches the meaning of touch. When dawn approaches, though the light is weak and grey, it changes everything. The darkness begins to dissolve, and faint outlines emerge, the curve of a shoulder, the line of a beard, the rise and fall of chests beneath cloaks. The men blink against the new light, not because it is bright, but because it feels intrusive, almost impolite. They shift apart slowly, as if separating from something sacred. The air that rushes in is colder, sharper, carrying the sting of salt and morning frost. They breathe it in and feel the warmth they shared begin to fade, pulled away by the same wind that once carried it to them. They do not mourn it. They simply know it is gone for now, to return when the next night demands it. They rise one by one, stretching stiff limbs, pulling cloaks tighter, and setting their boots against the damp boards. The warmth they built lingers for a few minutes more, trapped within the fibers of their clothing, clinging to the space they occupied. Then it dissolves into the air, leaving only traces. A faint smell, a memory of breath, a small patch of dryness where condensation hasn't yet settled. Each man feels the absence of the others immediately, though none say a word. They move to their places, lift their oars, and begin again. The cold returns, swift and complete, but something inside them remains tempered by the night's closeness. To the sea, their warmth is meaningless. To the men, it is everything. It is the last human boundary between existence and absence, between the body and the endless cold. They will share it again, night after night, without ceremony or thought. It will come in the shape of a shoulder against a shoulder, a cloak drawn wide enough for two, a breath that touches another's cheek. It is a small thing, invisible, fragile, yet it is what keeps them alive. They may never speak of it, but in the deep silence of the ship, when the cold tightens and the stars vanish once more, they will find it again. The human warmth will return, steady and patient, asking nothing, giving everything, and reminding them, in the quietest way possible, that survival is not a solitary act, but a shared one. The Songs of the Sea. Sometimes, when the night stretches too long and the mind begins to sink beneath the weight of silence, the men begin to sing. It does not start as music, not at first. It begins as a breath shared between them, a murmur that moves through the air like a slow wind, too soft to be called sound. Then another joins and another, until the ship itself seems to hum in reply. The songs are old, older than memory, older than the names of those who sing them. Their words have been worn smooth by time, their meanings scattered like driftwood across generations. Yet something remains, a rhythm, a pulse, a pattern that fits the sea. Each verse rises with the oars, falls with the return, keeping the body alive through repetition. The melody does not climb or descend. It flows quiet and patient, as if the sea itself were exhaling through human throats. The songs are not meant for joy. They are meant for endurance. Their sound fills the space between thought and silence, giving shape to the endless hours when work and stillness blend together. The men do not sing to be heard, for no one beyond the ship could ever hear them. They sing to mark the passing of time, to remind themselves that they still exist within it. The rhythm of the oars, the creak of the hull, the sigh of the water beneath, all these become instruments in a music that has no beginning and no end. Each man's voice is low, close to the sound of breath, but when joined together, they form something that feels larger than the sum of their bodies. It is not harmony but unity, not melody but motion. The song breathes with them, and in return, they breathe with the song. When the sky turns heavy and the wind sharpens, the song changes. It grows slower, deeper, more like chanting than singing. The notes stretch long and dark, echoing through the mist like a second sea above the first. The men lean into their oars, their movements matching the rhythm they create. The sound binds them together, a thread of human will drawn taut against the elements. The words no longer matter. They could be prayers, curses, or memories. What remains is tone, the low hum of persistence that rises from deep within the chest and moves outward, across the cold air, across the grey waves. Even the sea seems to respond, its surface shifting in rhythm, its breath matching theirs. There are verses that speak of home, though no one truly remembers what those words meant. There are verses of storms survived, of companions lost, of land that once rose green beyond the horizon. Yet when they sing them now, they are not telling stories. They are creating silence within the noise, building a small space where the mind can rest. The song becomes a boundary, a thin wall of sound that separates the men from the void. Within it, they are safe, even if only for the length of a breath. The music steadies them when words cannot. At night, when fog thickens and the sea turns invisible, the sound of their singing travels farther than sight. It drifts beyond the ship, carried by the wind, and then vanishes. No one knows where it goes. Perhaps to the ears of the drowned, perhaps to the sleeping coasts, perhaps to nothing at all. But for those who sing, it feels as though the world listens. The rhythm becomes a heartbeat too large to belong to any one man. The ship itself vibrates with it, the ropes tremble, the oars hum, the mast groans softly in tune. In that moment, vessel and crew become one living instrument, and the sea their endless audience. Sometimes the songs fall silent, and in that silence the absence of music feels louder than the storm. Without it, the air seems heavier, the cold sharper, the night longer. So one man begins again, voice cracked, throat dry, forcing sound through breath until the melody returns. The others follow, not out of duty but instinct. To stop singing would be to surrender to the sea's quiet, to let the world erase them. As long as their voices move, they remain. The act of singing becomes an act of being. Each note, pulled from the body, is a declaration. We are still here. Their voices are not beautiful. They are rough, shaped by wind and salt, by hunger and distance. But beauty is not what the sea demands. The sea demands rhythm, something steady to measure itself against. The songs provide that, not decoration, but balance. They echo the pulse of the waves, the weight of the oars, the heartbeat within the chest. The sound becomes mechanical, organic, eternal, all at once. The men no longer need to think about it. The melody exists between them like breath, natural, constant, shared. As the hours stretch, the singing fades and returns like tides. Some voices fall away into sleep, others rise to fill the gaps. The tone shifts as fatigue deepens. It grows softer, slower, more intimate. It is no longer for the group, but for each man's own endurance. In those moments, the song turns inward. It becomes a hum beneath the ribs, a vibration that keeps the blood moving. The men may not even notice they are still singing. The music continues even when no sound is made, carried forward by memory and rhythm alone. The sea itself has learned their song by now, and it repeats it endlessly beneath them. When the storm arrives, the sound changes once more. The song becomes a single note, stretched thin, almost lost in the roar of wind and water. Yet even as the waves rise and crash, even as the air fills with spray and cold, the men's voices persist, low, trembling, steady. It is not defiance, but coexistence. They do not sing against the storm, they sing within it. The music bends with the wind, breaks and reforms, carried through rain and mist like a thread that will not tear. The sea answers in its own way, a deeper rumble, a longer breath, a resonance that fills the space between man and water. For a while, there is no difference between the two. Then, as the storm passes, the voices fade. The last notes hang in the air, trembling, before dissolving into quiet. The ship drifts in calm again, surrounded by fog. The men lower their oars, their hands resting, their breath slowing. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full, swollen with the echo of everything that has been sung. It hums faintly inside their heads, even after the sound itself has vanished. In that silence they find warmth. Not of body, but of belonging. The warmth that comes from knowing they have created something together, however fleeting, against the vastness of the cold. The songs of the sea are not remembered. They do not survive in words or in writing. They are born, live, and die upon the waves. Each one ends as it began, quietly, without audience, without applause. Yet while they last, they give shape to the void, they fill the night with motion, and they hold the men within their gentle, rhythmic arms. The sea takes everything in the end, but not before it listens. In that exchange, between breath and water, between sound and silence, warmth returns for a moment, and the men, wrapped in their own voices, drift through the darkness as if carried by music itself. Fire, fear, and memory. Fire is both comfort and danger. The men have learned this through every voyage, every long night when the wind turned against them, and every dawn when frost clung to the edge of the world. They know what a single spark can do, how it can save or destroy, how it can mean warmth or ruin. The ship they live upon is sealed with pitch, soaked in oil, lined with rope, all of it ready to burn if touched by flame. And yet deep within that fragile wooden world they carry fire still. It sleeps inside a clay pot buried beneath ash, no larger than a fist, no brighter than a star hidden by mist. They call it the Ember, the quiet heart of the voyage, the small sun that travels with them across the dark water. They keep it alive, not through fuel, but through faith. The careful breath, the gentle hand, the patience of men who know that some things must never be allowed to die. The ember gives no heat to the body, only a whisper of red light when uncovered. It is not flame, not movement, only the memory of both. The men guard it as they would guard a child, protecting it from wind, from water, from neglect. No one shouts near it, voices lower when they draw close. The air around it feels still, as if the sea itself pauses to watch. At dawn, when the light returns, one of them will uncover the clay pot, blow softly through the ash, and wait. The first sign of life, a small thread of smoke, a dim red glow, is enough. The ember breathes again. The men nod, satisfied, and close the lid. They do not smile, for it is not joy they feel, but reassurance, the quiet relief that something continues to live when all else stands frozen. The ember is the proof that warmth still exists somewhere, even when none of them can feel it. To the men, this fire is more than light. It is memory. It carries within it every hearth they have ever known, every flame that ever touched their skin, every scent of burning wood that once rose through their homes. It remembers for them the warmth they cannot hold. The ember becomes a bridge between worlds. the world of the living and the world of endurance, the world of comfort and the world of survival. It reminds them that warmth is not gone, only waiting. They take turns tending it, though the tending is little more than watching, breathing and waiting. They never let it fall dark. It becomes their quiet ritual, performed without word or gesture, repeated so often that it becomes instinct. In that act, there is devotion not to gods or spirits, but to life itself. When storms come, when the sea strikes the hull with iron hands, when waves rise and crash over the deck, they protect the ember first. They seal it beneath layers of cloth, set it within the hollow of the ship's ribs, where the motion of the water is gentlest. Even as rain falls and lightning burns across the sky, they trust that somewhere beneath their feet, a small, invisible flame waits out the chaos. The ember has no fear of storms, it has survived too many already, and so it becomes their courage, not loud or defiant, but steady, unyielding. The men may tremble, the ship may groan, but the ember holds. When calm returns, they check it again. A hand reaches into the ash, fingers brushing the warm dust. If the heat is still there, if the faintest breath of smoke rises, then the world feels safe again. They open the pot just long enough to see the glow, then close it, sealing that light back into sleep. The act is small, but it restores balance. It tells them that not all fires are meant to rage. Some must rest, waiting for their time. At night, when the sea hums softly and the air grows still, they sit near where the ember sleeps. They cannot see it, but they feel its presence, as though its warmth has a voice only the body can hear. It gives shape to the darkness. The ship feels less hollow, less alone. Some of the men remember the first time they saw flame, as children by a hearth, in homes now lost to memory. They remember how light once filled walls, how shadows danced gently against stone. They remember hands that tended the same kind of fire. Mothers, fathers, friends, faces that blurred over years but remained clear in that flicker of warmth. In these quiet hours, the ember becomes all those memories at once. It is not just heat, it is connection. When at last they reach land, when the ship touches sand and the sea loosens its grip, the men bring the ember ashore. They do this carefully, as if carrying the heart of the voyage itself. The air feels different on land. Lighter, less dense, but almost too open after weeks confined within the wooden ribs of the ship. They choose a place near the shore, sheltered from wind, and gather dry twigs and moss. The man who carried the ember kneels, opens the clay pot and breathes into it once more. The ash stirs. The red glow deepens. The first spark breaks through and a small tongue of flame rises. It grows with each breath, with each handful of wood, until it becomes a fire. Real, alive, moving. The men sit around it, silent. The heat touches their faces, unfamiliar and soft. They lean closer, letting it enter their skin, their eyes half closed as if afraid to blink. The light flickers across their features, revealing lines carved by wind and time. For a moment it feels strange to see one another clearly again. The fire paints them in color, gold, red, amber, after so long surrounded only by gray. No one speaks, there is nothing to say. They know this is the same fire that slept through the voyage, the same light that survived storms and silence. It is the continuation of something older than the sea, older than themselves. As the flames rise higher, they feed it carefully, almost reverently. Each piece of wood becomes an offering, each crackle a reminder that life endures. The fire's warmth does more than touch their skin. It moves inward, thawing the cold that has lived beneath their ribs for too long. The memory of fear softens beneath its glow. They sit close enough to feel the sting of heat, the pulse of something alive in the air. The sound of the fire, soft, rhythmic, whispering, fills the space where the sea once spoke. It is the sound of home, of belonging, of rest. In the light of that fire, they remember everything the voyage made them forget. The smell of earth after rain, the softness of grass, the feel of steady ground beneath their feet, the taste of warmth itself. These memories come quietly, as if summoned by the flame. They do not speak them aloud, they let them exist in the silence, shared without words. The fire becomes not only the end of the journey, but the link between all journeys, the proof that even across water and time, some part of life remains untouched. As night deepens, they sit together, watching the embers shift and settle. The fire begins to lower itself again, its light dimming into a soft glow. One man stirs the ashes, ensuring that a small core remains, red and alive. They will not let it die. Even on land, the ember must be preserved, carried forward to the next place, the next storm, the next waiting sea. In this act, the men understand the truth of fire, that it is not just heat or light, but memory made visible, a fragile promise that warmth can survive the cold, that life can sleep without fading, that even in silence, something within the world continues to glow. The art of enduring. Endurance begins as resistance, but over time it becomes something quieter, not a struggle against the world, but a slow agreement with it. The men of the sea learn this not through wisdom or speech, but through repetition, through the long rhythm of days that all feel the same. At first, the cold hurts. It bites at the skin, steals the breath, turns each movement into a test. But the body learns, the nerves dull, the skin thickens, and pain transforms into presence. What once felt unbearable becomes simply what is. The sea ceases to be an enemy and becomes instead a teacher, vast, calm, indifferent, and patient. It offers no kindness, no cruelty, only constancy. In its endless motion, the men discover a strange peace. They no longer expect warmth or comfort. They no longer wish for the shore. Their strength grows not from defiance, but from acceptance. To endure is not to conquer. It is to move forward without question, to live without asking for softness. Each day begins with frost. The air is sharp, the rope stiff, the wood cold beneath the hands. The men rise from sleep slowly, their joints heavy, their faces pale beneath layers of frost. They speak little. The morning is filled with quiet movements, the sound of oars being lifted, cloaks shaken, hands rubbing warmth into numb fingers. The breath of each man curls upward in the dim light, mingling with the mist that sits low upon the water. The sea waits unchanged, stretching in every direction. Its surface shifts gently, neither welcoming nor resisting the ship's advance. The first strokes of the oars cut through it with a sound that is almost tender, a rhythm that will carry them through another day. Work fills the hours. They row, they mend, they bale water, they adjust ropes, they check the ember, they eat when hunger reminds them. Nothing changes, and yet everything depends on these small repetitions. The ship demands attention, and attention becomes devotion. In these acts, the men find purpose. Their hands grow calloused, their arms ache, but their minds quiet. The rhythm of the oars replaces thought. The sea gives them no direction, but the act of moving becomes its own meaning. They no longer wonder where they are or how far they have gone. They exist entirely within motion. The world outside them has no boundaries, and so they create their own within the steady circle of their tasks. When the wind rises, they adjust without complaint. When the rain falls, they cover themselves and wait. There is no anger, no hope, only patience. Time on the sea is not counted in hours or days, but in the distance between storms. In the long calm between them, life becomes a sequence of gestures repeated until they lose individuality. The hand tightening a rope, the arm lifting an oar, the breath measured against the cold. These motions done 1,000 times turn into a kind of meditation. They are no longer effort, but rhythm. The men's faces grow still, their eyes fixed on nothing, their bodies moving as one with the ship. In endurance, they discover a kind of control that no strength could bring. They cannot command the sea or the wind, but they can command themselves. They learn to conserve energy, to balance force with restraint. They learn that power lies not in action but in persistence, not in victory but in continuation. The body becomes tool and vessel, shaped by repetition. The mind, freed from struggle, grows clear. It no longer seeks meaning in suffering. It no longer separates discomfort from peace. In the stillness between effort and exhaustion, they find a strange kind of clarity, the simplicity of existence reduced to its quiet essentials: breath, motion, rhythm, silence. The cold remains, but it changes nature. It ceases to wound. It becomes companion, constant and predictable. It sharpens thought without pain, like stone against metal. The sea's breath seeps into their bones until they move with it, inhale when it rises, exhale when it falls. The ship's motion becomes the body's motion. The sea's rhythm becomes the heartbeat. They endure not because they are strong, but because they have forgotten what it means not to endure. The world no longer tests them, it includes them. In this quiet acceptance, there is peace. When the sun appears, pale and low, it brings no warmth, but it marks the slow passage of time. The light spreads across the water, turning it to silver. The men lift their faces to it, not in worship, but in acknowledgement. Light, like cold, has become part of their world's order, neither blessing nor curse. They take it in silently, eyes half closed, the glow reflecting off frost and salt. The day continues as all others have. The tasks repeat, the sea moves, the ship answers. Sometimes one of them pauses, his hand resting on the oar, his gaze lingering on the horizon. In that endless grey there is nothing to see, yet he looks anyway. The act of looking is enough. It is the mind's way of remembering that space exists beyond what the body can touch. Then he lowers his head and returns to work. The others follow, their rhythm never breaking. The world contracts again to the size of the ship, the movement of their bodies, the pull of the sea. At night, when the wind quiets and the stars appear, small, cold, indifferent, they rest. The stars do not guide them, they simply accompany. The men lie close beneath their cloaks, feeling the warmth that endurance has earned them. Their breath rises together, forming a soft mist above their heads. The sea continues its slow pulse and the ship drifts with it. There is no conversation, no reflection. There is only the steady continuation of being. In that stillness, thought becomes unnecessary. Fear dissolves, even memory begins to fade, replaced by presence. The world shrinks to the sound of water, the weight of breath, the faint glow of the sleeping fire hidden below. Endurance, once effort, becomes art. It requires balance between movement and stillness, between surrender and control. The men do not resist the cold or the sea, they inhabit them. They no longer think of survival as triumph, but as harmony. Each day survived is not a victory over the world, but a continuation within it. They have become part of its rhythm, absorbed by its vast patience. The sea no longer tests them. It teaches them how to remain. In the end, endurance is not a matter of strength at all. It is a state of quiet agreement, a choice to exist without resistance. The body becomes the vessel through which the world passes. The mind becomes the surface upon which time rests. The Vikings understand this not through words, but through hours spent rowing against nothing, sleeping against the cold, waking into sameness. In their stillness, they find the closest thing to peace that the sea can offer, not comfort, not warmth, but the steady, unbroken continuation of life. They endure because they no longer need to do anything else. They endure because endurance itself has become the art of being. The return of land and light. After many nights upon the grey water, after countless hours of rowing and silence, the sea begins to change. The wind, once sharp and merciless, grows soft and low, moving like breath rather than blade. The waves lose their edge, their sound deepening from a growl to a hum. The men sense it before they see it. The slow turning of the world, the faint promise that something other than sea awaits ahead. The air carries a different scent now. Beneath the salt and tar lies something unfamiliar, something fragile. The smell of soil, faint but certain. It drifts toward them with the morning mist, sweet in a way the sea never was. A scent that speaks of life and stillness and roots hidden deep beneath unseen ground. The men lift their heads, not in sudden hope but in slow recognition. Their eyes narrow toward the horizon, where the grey begins to pale into silver. Land is near. They do not cheer. There is no shout, no gesture of triumph. The body that has learned to endure does not remember celebration. The men only breathe deeper, slower, their lungs adjusting to the air that feels thicker, fuller, carrying the taste of earth. They feel the weight of their own exhaustion, the ache of arms that have rowed through endless hours. Yet within that fatigue is calm, the stillness of having outlasted something vast. They are not warm, not rested, not triumphant, but they are alive. The ship creaks softly beneath them, its wood drying in the lighter wind, as if it too senses the end of the voyage. The sound of the oars fades to a slower rhythm. The sea that once seemed infinite begins to shrink, no longer an endless grey, but a wide road leading home. When the land finally appears, it does so quietly. A faint line first, a shadow against the pale distance, then a shape, then colour. The horizon breaks open, revealing dark slopes, low hills, the suggestion of trees. The mist clings to the earth, veiling it like a memory that is almost remembered. The men watch without speaking, their faces expressionless, as though unsure whether to trust what they see. The sea has deceived them before, showing mirages of light and line where none existed. But this time, the smell of soil grows stronger, and the cries of distant birds reach them through the fog. The land is real. They can feel it in the pull of the tide beneath the ship, in the way the air changes weight, in the silence that follows between waves. The ship slows, the oars lift one last time and rest. The men sit still, listening to the sound of water against the hull. Soft, familiar, steady. They have lived so long with motion that stillness feels foreign. Their eyes move from sea to sky, then to the thin band of earth ahead. For a moment, none of them rises. It is not hesitation, but reverence. They have crossed distance beyond measure, carried by endurance rather than direction. To see land now feels less like discovery than return. The world ahead is not the same as the one they left, and neither are they. They have learned the language of the sea: patience, silence, and acceptance. And it will follow them wherever they go. The ember, which has slept so long in its clay vessel, is uncovered. The man who tends it kneels, brushes aside the ash, and breathes softly. The faint red glow stirs, then flares. Smoke curls upward, thin and blue. The others watch in stillness. In the pale light of dawn, the ember burns brighter than the sun that hides behind the clouds. They gather around it, hands open, palms outstretched. The warmth that touches them is slight, but it feels enormous after so many nights without it. The heat carries memory, the glow of hearths, the breath of homes, the lives once lived far from the edge of the world. The ember is the same fire that crossed the sea, the same patient flame that endured through cold and storm. It is the only witness to their journey that remembers every wave. Around that light, they sit and let the body remember softness. Cloaks are unwrapped and spread across the deck to dry. Their boots are pulled off and emptied of salt water. Fingers stiff from frost loosen slowly in the gentle warmth. Some close their eyes, some eat in silence, breaking bread softened by damp, swallowing slowly as if relearning how to taste. The air smells of smoke and soil, a combination both strange and familiar. The sound of the sea has changed again, no longer the endless voice of distance, but a murmur fading behind them, a presence that begins to release its hold. The wind from the land carries the faint rustle of leaves. It has been so long since they heard the sound of anything that was not water or wood. The newness of it feels almost unreal. The ship drifts closer to shore. Beneath it, the color of the water shifts from steel to green, and through its surface, they can see the sea floor, sand and stone unmoving. The anchor is lowered, the sound deep and final. For the first time in weeks, the ship is still. The men sit quietly as if listening for something beyond hearing. The silence that follows is vast. The sea laps gently against the hull, a slow farewell. No words are needed. The ocean that has carried them does not ask for gratitude, and they offer none, only understanding. To live with the sea is to accept its silence, to let it take what it will and leave what it must. When at last they step onto land, it feels unfamiliar beneath their feet. Too firm, too still, too quiet. The ground does not sway, it does not breathe as the ship did. Their legs, used to the shifting rhythm of the sea, move uncertainly. They walk like men learning balance for the first time. The earth is cold, damp, alive. The air feels heavy with scents. Grass, wood, moss, the faint sweetness of decay. The world seems louder now, filled with noises they had forgotten. The crackle of twigs, the whisper of wind through leaves, the faint hum of unseen life. They look at one another, not in disbelief, but in quiet recognition of having reached what was promised. They build a small fire on the shore, feeding it from the ember they carried. The flames rise, golden and slow, curling upward into the pale sky. Around it, they gather once more, faces turned toward the warmth, eyes half closed. The light flickers over their skin, revealing the journey etched into every line and scar. They do not speak. They have no words left that the sea has not already taken. Instead, they listen to the crackle of the fire, the sound of waves behind them, and the first cries of birds overhead. Each sound feels like a thread pulling them gently back into the world of the living. The ember that once slept becomes flame again. The flame becomes light. And in that light, they see not victory but continuation. The same life that existed before the voyage, carried through the endless grey and returned here, changed but unbroken. The fire reflects in their eyes, steady and calm. The sea remains behind them, vast and endless, stretching into mist. It does not vanish, it only waits. Its rhythm continues, slower now, softer, as if resting after its long watch. The men know they will leave again someday, drawn once more by the horizon's call. But for now, they sit between two worlds, sea and soil, silence and sound, endurance and rest. As the day unfolds, light grows stronger. The sky clears, revealing faint colors long forgotten. The blue of distance, the pale gold of sun upon frost, the dark green of living earth. The men lift their faces to it, eyes closed, breathing deeply. The warmth upon their skin feels like memory made real. For the first time in what feels like ages, they do not move. The sea behind them hums, the fire before them breathes, and between the two they find peace. The journey has not ended, it has only changed shape. What was once the art of enduring becomes now the art of remembering, of carrying the sea within them while learning again the quiet weight of land and light. The voyage ends not with sound but with calm. The ship rests upon the sand, its wood glistening under faint light, every plank marked by salt and thyme. Around it, the air smells of moss and smoke. The men step down slowly, boots sinking into the solid ground that holds steady beneath them. The earth feels strange after so many nights of motion. Heavy, still, real. They pause, listening to the sea withdraw behind them, slow and patient. It does not rage, it simply leaves the same way it had carried them, without promise, without farewell. They build a fire, a real one, this time. Wood catches, smoke curls upward, and the flames rise alive and steady. The sound of burning wood feels both foreign and familiar. The men sit around it, faces turned toward the warmth, eyes quiet. No one speaks of the sea. Words have grown too small for what they endured. Instead, they breathe deeply, filling their lungs with the smell of earth and flame. The warmth touches their skin, slow and patient. It moves through their layers of wool and leather, waking the memory of sensation. It stings, then softens, then settles. For the first time in many nights, they feel the difference between surviving and resting. Their faces glow in the firelight, not young, not victorious, but calm. The light flickers over scars and shadows, showing the quiet truth of endurance. They eat small pieces of bread and fish, now warm from the fire, chewing slowly. The food tastes different, simple, alive, as though heat itself restores its shape. The men say nothing. They only listen to the hum of flame, the whisper of air, the faint sound of the tide behind them. The fire crackles, steady and unhurried, echoing the rhythm of the sea that had once surrounded them. The night deepens, the flames dance low, painting the world gold and red. The men lean closer, feeling warmth not as luxury, but as presence. In the silence, understanding returns. That true warmth was never the fire, never the furs, never the drink. It was the quiet persistence that had kept them alive when all else had fallen away. The strength that had guided their arms, the stillness that had steadied their minds. That was the warmth the sea could not take. It had lived inside them all along, invisible but enduring. Through storms and silence, through hunger and cold, it had remained, a steady ember behind every breath. Now, as the outer fire burns before them, they recognize its twin within. The two flames mirror one another, one of wood, one of will. The men sit in stillness, hands resting open, letting the heat move inward until it becomes indistinguishable from the warmth of their own bodies. The sea hums softly in the distance, fading into calm. The fire lowers, its flames curling into embers. None of them move to feed it. It does not need to live beyond this night. Its work is done. Around it, the men breathe evenly, their bodies unwinding into rest. The sound of the world has quieted to almost nothing, only wind, water, and heartbeats. When sleep comes, it is deep and wordless. The ship rests, the earth holds them, the sky stretches clear above, its stars pale against the smoke. The sea breathes in and out, patient and eternal, and beneath the skin within the silence the warmth endures. Steady, human, unkillable.